Well, good morning, everybody. Here it is, Halloween, and as I was thinking about the transition into the new month, I just want to kind of give you a quick overlay of what we're going to do in this forecast video. As you can see here in the satellite data from yesterday, we are going to watch a large section of the country open up to much more benign weather, warmer, drier in this whole region after this weekend. Probably it's only going to be the northwest and the northeast that see wetter conditions as our storm track kind of lines up across the northern tier of the United States. And that's the first part. The second thing we're going to get into here as we go deeper into this forecast is how is the pattern going to possibly evolve from November to December. So I have some long-range stuff I really want to dig into with you for what I think could be just an interesting difference between November and December, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, all right? Now, right now, Melissa continues to roll up, the Atlantic Ocean here, and it is, just take a look here. This is the infrared data overnight last night. The upper level wind shear is just tearing this thing to shreds, and that is all compliments of the deep low that just moved through the central part of the United States. That has just tossed its front into this. The upper level winds have picked up, and it's, Melissa's been thankfully weakened significantly as it moves into the North Atlantic. But as I was watching the satellite data just kind of late in the day yesterday, a couple of things to take note of here. Take a look down in Arizona. We did have a couple of large wildfires that showed up here on satellite. Arizona remains one of the more vulnerable states in the country to wildfire risk. Same thing for Southern California as we move through this winter time frame, only because of the La Niña tends to just not support a subtropical jet, which means these areas, which did get plenty of moisture, a lot of moisture back over the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, that is going to go into greening everything up. That's going to be producing a lot of vegetation that if we go back over dry, becomes a major risk for fire. So I just wanted you to kind of think through that and see some of these areas. But it is Halloween, so I know I have some kids that like to watch the videos, so let's just go ahead and talk about Halloween here for a moment. But the only system in town, the only thing of significance, is the deeper low leaving the northeast. It's going to be very windy in the northeast around the backside of this. If you are in the Midwest, upper Midwest, northern plains, we got to watch out for some showers in through this area, plus the lake effect. Showers coming off as well. Much of the rest of the country, though, is going to be kind of out of it. But I do want to mention these winds. We are going to be seeing stronger winds kind of move through a few pockets of the country, down into the Great Lakes, into the Northeast, and then here in parts of the North Central Plains, getting into the upper Midwest as we work through the day today. Now, where it's calm today, that's where we have our frost this morning. You can see Missouri, parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, under frost freeze issues. Same thing down here, parts of the northern parts of Alabama, Georgia, and then getting back into the western sides of, the Carolinas here, where we are expecting some cooler temperatures. But there is the wind risk here in the northeast. And then we're going to talk about this. This is some very strong winds coming into Montana very soon. So have a look at it. First, I just thought I would do this. It's kind of fun. This is 2009. We had just had our daughter Amelia, and I got the bright idea to dress up as a rear view mirror and made her the car freshener, the tree car. So anyways, happy Halloween, everybody. This is just, she's now 16. It kind of kills me to think through that. But anyways, this is, pre-beard, pre-stress of the world Eric, back in 2009. All right, back to the forecast. So this is this afternoon and this evening. So we could have some interior snow showers in the northeast. Don't be surprised if here in the northern tier of, I'm talking about North Dakota, Minnesota, that we're going to be looking at some possible mixing into some snow showers this evening. But this isn't widespread coverage, but it's just there's some rain. Now, the only other place that's looking wet, of course, we have this continual onslaught of moisture coming into British Columbia, but you can see the tail end of these fronts tonight getting into the Pacific Northwest, just the corner here of Oregon and Washington. As we keep playing it forward, let's just walk our way through Saturday into Sunday. There's a little low that spins up over the Ohio River Valley. You can see it right there. And that's really about it. There's not a whole lot happening as we make this transition into November, which is why I think it's going to be important to talk about the temperatures as we get out there farther. Now, max temperatures today. It is a cool Halloween for a lot of folks in the midsection of the country and east. As you can see here, these temperatures are, they're 10, 15 degrees cooler than normal, while the west is, 5, 8, 10 degrees warmer than average. Now, I know you're going, wait a minute, didn't you just show a low and some snow going through the north? I did. These warm temperatures are getting hit early in the day. It's going to get cool pretty quickly after that. Just to show you what the minimum temperatures look like, this was this morning. If we get into tomorrow morning, so this kind of gives us an idea of the overnight lows. We had some pretty cold air in the midsection of the country, over into the southeast to be contending with, while the west is quite warm. Now, just thinking all of that through, let's add in one more component, and then we'll get some big picture things here going. I am concerned about the winds, so already by tonight, look, we have 40, 50 mile an hour gusts here in the northeast, so please be prepared for that. And then you also note that as we get into Saturday and Sunday, look at the strong winds coming out of parts of Montana. I'm heading to Glasgow next week. Glasgow, I'm heading over towards Seattle and then down to Salem, so a quick trip to the west again. And I'm quite concerned about the strength of these winds coming in on Sunday and possibly lingering a little bit into Monday farther to the east here. Very strong winds coming off the mountains, 50, 60, maybe 70 mile an hour gusts, so we need to be quite aware of that. Now you're going to notice something as I play this out farther. This is just cumulative maximum wind gusts. And as we get into next weekend, there's a system coming through. Again, when is it? This Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So that's November the 8th, where we're just watching the risk of, just strong winds. It's just that time of year that we get these kind of things. And so just need to be well aware of that. And then take note of what's going on the West Coast. This is our kind of target area for where systems are entering the country. But the reality is there's a pretty sizable ridge that's in the midsection of the U.S., which is why, over the next 7 days, all right, we are seeing more moisture into the west. But there's a large region in the country here that's not expecting much other than a little weak low that moves through here over the weekend. So this is a drier time period to start this new month. And just thinking that through, I thought it'd be good just to review, what happened in October. As you can see here, the precipitation pattern in October, we were drier upper Midwest. We were drier down in parts of Texas, corner of Oklahoma here, pockets of the southeast, parts of the mid-Atlantic into the northeast. We were wetter, across much of the west, especially this little corridor here as you come over the mountains into Wyoming, Montana, into North Dakota. That little region quite wet in the month of October. If we want to look at the soil moisture change, this was the beginning of the month. Just to kind of give you some reference here, this goes down to 16 inches or 40 centimeters. It's a percentile, so you need to think of it as a rank. And this is where we finished. All right, so the beginning of the month and the end. So much better moisture in through parts of Kentucky and Tennessee as one example. Also into Pennsylvania and New York. And what's interesting is if you look at the new drought monitor, which is over here on the left, and compare it to the 4-week class change, we saw improvement, quite a bit of improvement in these areas, and also improvement throughout pockets of the West. Now, there was drought degradation, Texas, Oklahoma, pockets of the Midwest. You can see down here in, Georgia, Alabama, northern Florida, and then pockets of the Mid-Atlantic did go a shade drier during this last month. And the big question remains, what does this look like as we get into to spring? All right. But in the near term, just have a look. This is the area that's going to be drier going forward. It's a map looking at the probability of having less than 1/10 of an inch of rain over the next 10 days. And throughout much of the plains, the Four Corner states, the Southwest, even along the Gulf Coast here, even toward the Appalachian Mountains, we're not in a wet pattern. And that's largely thanks to this, okay? This is the temperature pattern that's setting up. And it's all kind of written right here. See the cooler here and the cooler there? The jet's going to go around this, over the top, dive around like this, and exit. And so these ridges that build in to bring in this heat are, let me rephrase that. The ridges that result because of the heat here at this time of year can get stuck. And we think it might be a lot of November that shares this first 10-day forecast, as you see here. But I'll tell you what my top priority is. A top thing I'm going to be watching, honestly, from now through March, I'll be focusing a lot on Alaska and the temperature pattern across Alaska and the Chukchi Sea and the Bering Sea and the Arctic. I think this is going to be an important region to monitor for the setup of any shift in the downstream temperature pattern here. But in the near term, this is the way it's kind of stuck. And so what do we see in the jet stream? Well, the jet's still racing across the Pacific. It's diving into a Gulf of Alaska trough, runs up over this ridge. There's still some troughing here, but it exits quickly into the North Atlantic. And this pattern has got movement to it. It's not blocked. It's just where the jet is going to live. It's going to live here. So it's not southwest flow. If it was southwest flow, I'd be talking about, huge November storm systems. We'd be singing the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, that kind of thing. We don't have that. We don't have this southwest flow yet. It'll come, but it's just not there now. But what this is going to do is target the northwest, linger in the northeast, and the midsection of the country is kind of left out of the flow. I mean, if you just have a look at what the Pacific's doing now, we continue to send very high momentum air across the Pacific. But when you look at these diagrams, or these maps, and you see that flow coming in, my brain often just says, well, when is it going to get going here? That's our mess right now, if you will. You see, if we were going to talk about a super active, very wet November, I would be just mentioning flow from Hawaii coming into California, Mexico, running across the country and meeting with a polar jet just to rip off systems after they go through the midsection of the country. So because we're not there, because we're getting more of this, our forecast is looking something like this, okay? Systems, you just watch. They're going to kind of come over through this, over the top, and roll like that, like you currently see. So Melissa, trough that kicked Melissa out, kicker wave on the backside, deep low that's in the Gulf of Alaska. Playing through the weekend, here's the low that sneaks through parts of the Mid-South. That's that rainmaker this weekend here. But it's starved for moisture for the most part, so that's why it's not more of an effect than you have with this map. It is cold inside there, though. But as we play it forward, you can see the influence of the ridge, right? So systems, again, just doing that. That's their trajectory through the start of the month of November. Now, what I'll be curious about is some of the models are attempting out there around the 7th, 8th, 9th to dip a pretty decent low over the Great Lakes, maybe with a preceding low that sneaks through this area as well. But is it going to be producing much in the way of precipitation? Let's go ahead and have a look at the forecaster. I like this North American view. The GFS, I looked at them all this morning. They're in decent enough agreement that I just want to show you one map. So this is where we start off the day on Friday. We just work our way through the weekend. There's the low, a little low moving through Kentucky, Tennessee. You can see the flow coming through parts of the Northwest. As we work into early next week, it'll be interesting to see on Monday into Tuesday if that low can link up, but there's a little, I don't want to call it a tropical disturbance, that's wrong, but there's a little feature coming out of the Gulf here that means these two might roll up the East Coast with a little bit of moisture. Meanwhile, most of the story's written in the Northwest. It's written in the Gulf of Alaska. And you can see just these deep lows continuing to lash midweek next week against the West Coast. Could be talking about some decent snows next Thursday, hitting Wednesday, Thursday, hitting the Sierra Nevada. As we just play it forward, look, can you find them? Low and low. That's kind of the paint the corner scenario. While the midsection of the country is more mild, but at times even getting windy. So we have to keep an eye on that. Now, about a week from now, the models, remember, we're trying to drop a low pressure system, and I say models, GFS is on board with this too, somewhere here through the central U.S. And it seems as though it's going to have two components to it. There'll be a broader trough here and a surface wave to the south, and that could come through parts of the Midwest and then roll itself up the East Coast. But there's no denying that most of the action is here as we work through the next 10 days or so. In terms of total precipitation, let's just go and have a look at it across North America. As we just play it forward, this is where we kind of land. So there's that system on the 7th, 8th, and 9th coming through the midsection of the country. Outside of that, it's just the northeast and northwest that seem to have the most active weather. So if we just look at precipitation anomalies, because we looked at temperatures, let's just take you out to the 10-day average. We're much drier to the south in the delta over toward the Red River Valley of the south. We're wet here, wet in the northeast. That seems to be the pattern we're going to be witnessing for a while. What about week 2? Let's kind of blow this up real quick. The models aren't really breaking that down too much. Maybe just look at the GFS as an example. Still see this northern track of, where the flow could be, but it's a lot of the country that is going to be seeing drier than normal conditions for quite some time during that. And the concern is the models are looking like this for November. Now, the GFS is the more aggressive on terms of getting the precipitation anomalies, especially on the drier side of things. And so it's very dry from Texas into Arkansas through the lower Mississippi River Valley. The European model is not as aggressive, but it is still dry. The European model is much more interested, though, in the Pacific jet behavior targeting the Northwest, as you see here. And again, there's this track running through here, such that if you're in the northern tier of the country, Great Lakes, coming out the Northeast, you have the better chances of seeing near normal to above normal precipitation. Now, I want to be clear, this is not like set in stone. You will have moisture that comes through this area. This is just drier than normal. And again, I'm just going to tell you what's not happening. We are not getting southwest flow in the jet. You can get it multiple ways. I mentioned one, get the subtropical jet going. Or two, just dive troughs in through here and let them eject. They're not doing that. They're coming up like this and then diving over here, hence the drier risks in this area. So that's been a pretty consistent forecast overall for a while. Now, I'm going to talk temperatures before I get into this idea about the way I think November might transition into December. This is the newest update on the forecast for frost over the next 7 days. We got some really cold air in here earlier this week. We've got patchy issues down here in the southeast, but there's no surprises, like I've been saying all week with this frost map. This is very normal for the first week of November. Looking at those max temperatures real quick, watch the evolution of the warm-up that's going to start in the west and move to the central U.S. as we go forward into this first week of November. So here's today to tomorrow. Saturday's a cool one there. But watch, Sunday, those winds ripping across here, downslope, compressional warming, we're back up. High plains front range may crack 80 on Sunday. That's a quick cool down after that, but there's still mild air invading the midsection of the country as the ridge opens up. And if we look out there at kind of the sliding window, this is a 5-day sliding window. There's no denying that most of North America going into the first 10, 15 days of November is going to be quite mild. And there's thought that it could stay that way. Now, just for quick review, this is where the temperatures were in October. So we want to see the ranks for average temperatures. It was very mild from the southwest to the southern plains, all through the central U.S., Corn Belt, upper Midwest. This whole region was very, very mild. We saw more cooler days in the southeast. We saw cooler days in the west, but this is kind of the setup, and we know that the next 10, 15 days are going to favor a mild go of it in the month of November. So this is where we have to start thinking hard about where we might be after that. And I want to show you something. Here are our troughs flanking the corners. So there's one and there's the other one. This is the European extended forecast. There's the ridge in the middle. Now going through the middle of November, even toward the end of November, we don't see in the model any major indication of a pattern flip. But it's right here that you're going to want to watch here toward the Bering Sea, toward the Chukchi Sea. Along the Aleutian Islands that I'm going to be keeping an eye on late in November. And what I'm going to watch for is if we can finally shake the troughs that have been in this area and build a little bit of ridging. You see, by the end of November, starting into the beginning of December, there seems to be this positive P&A or whatever you want to call it. Just a ridge up the west coast. And it's displaced the trough farther back to the west and south. So what we've done here now is we've taken a pattern, and it's almost as though it's retrograded a little bit. We brought the ridge from the middle part of the country and the Intermountain West now to the west coast, and that could open up for this. And we see that the beginning of December may favor, troughs of cold air here. So what do we do with this? You tend to just take the country and split it and say, if you're in the west, this is a more mild pattern. If you're east, you're going to get shots of colder air coming through. And it's December, so we'll be talking about lake effect snow if this sets up. This will be a major pattern flip from what we expect November to be like. And I'm going to try to build some evidence around this and then apply it to the rest of the planet. So first of all, I was curious, okay? I went out and I looked at NOAA's data, December, January, February for the contiguous U.S., so lower 48, and I just looked at the temperatures. And it's interesting to note that after 1979, that was the winter of 78-79, which was a mega winter for the United States. We've had a bit of an upward trend in our temperatures and very limited, serious cold winters. Now, there's been a few nasty ones like 13 into 14, or you think about 9 into 10, just as an example. But I was curious what it takes for December and January and February to just go Arctic blast cold, okay? Now, you can imagine there's a polar vortex disruption in there. You can imagine that it takes strong flow, but the orientation of the jet stream begins for North America right there. The Bering Sea, Chukchi Sea, Alaska, this side of Russia, just ridge it out. And what you're doing here is we're displacing all of this warm air into this region. And what happens is you start to build a stockpile of cold air in Western Canada, and it just races through the country with every low that comes through. This also displaces the polar vortex. You put this heat in through here. What you're doing is you're perturbing the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere into the stratosphere, and the polar vortex displaces itself and finds it over North America or over Europe and just keeps kind of wobbling around. And you say, well, is there another clue as to if we could get a winter like this? Yeah, I mean, you could look at ocean temperatures. But again, is it a strong La Nina? No. Strong La Ninas are not like the key indicator for brutal cold through much of the United States. It's something going on here. You got to keep an eye on Alaska or Greenland. Wintertime blocking in Scandinavia too. So here, watch for ridges. Here, watch for big ridges. And over Greenland. Those areas, if they block up over winter, they are the signal that, the pattern has got some potential. It can make a big run at long duration cold. So are the ocean temperatures looking anything like this as we get into winter? Okay, yeah. You can kind of see here that there's been significant cooling in the Gulf of Alaska. Our La Nina continues to build. I would not call it a strong La Nina, but it's not weak by any means. I mean, it's edging its way toward moderate strength. But there's a couple of other things on this I want you to see. Like notice already in the Bering Sea and the Chukchi Sea, we've got some warmer water. But sea ice extent, when you look at it compared to the median ice edge, not age, median ice edge for October 30th, there's actually some ice that's already invaded this part of the Chukchi Sea. I guess what I'm saying is, if I were going to be looking for major Arctic signals in December, January, and February, I'd want to see the color shading, which represents the snow and ice concentration here, way over there, not up against the median line. So that's a component to this, all right? The next thing is, what do we need the tropics to do? Well, if you're in winter and you're in the eastern 2/3 of the United States, I'm talking about really the Rocky Mountains east, get the MJO to come all the way over to phase 812. Like this is the cold side of the MJO. This is the mild side of the MJO. Now, personally, just based on a couple of research papers I read, there's going to be a lot of talk about the MJO trying to get into phases 6 and 7. Is it going to linger here, which is a possibility, or does it collapse, or does it just make it? Does it just zip out here at some point? Now, I don't think it's going to do that. I don't think it's going to get all the way over to phase 8 and 1 as we enter the month of December. But if it did, this is a major Arctic signal for the eastern part of the United States. Okay? Now, thinking this through, I want to take you from here over to the European model webpage. So the ECMWF makes their own maps and analyses. And I wanted to talk through a few things. Their MJO projections, you can just see here that you can got the colors going out day 10, 15, 20. They're letting it linger in phases, 5, 6, and 7, mainly 6 and 7. And that is a lot of western U.S. ridging, northeastern United States troughing kind of setup. You got to really blow yourself all the way over here into the Pacific Ocean for the signals to go over really cold for a lot of North America. So that's one thing to talk about. The second thing to talk about is we can just go ahead and look at a Hofmüller diagram. You see, this is, if you kind of get yourself oriented here, can you see the map down here? This is Indonesia. So the Pacific is there, the Indian Ocean is here. And this just lines up vertically with this. Now, this right here was what a lot of us had been watching. This was the slow transition from phases 1 into 2, 3, and 4, where we currently sit today, 4 and 5. Now, can you just imagine that you saw these colors like this just continue to go right into this area? If they did that and stayed there, I would be just screaming at the top of my lungs, like, hey, get ready. It's going to get cold very soon. But instead, we kind of get a little bit of interesting behavior where the majority of the rising motion tends to linger in phases 4, 5, with a little piece of it that quickly sneaks out, almost Kelvin wave-like, as it gets out there in early November. So I just want to say that we're not fully on the tropical signal of this thing just ripping itself out and going. The other piece to this is the polar vortex. We got to start talking about this. It's that time of year. So how do you analyze this graphic, which goes out all the way, to the 18th of November? So what you are looking for is these are the normal bands within the polar vortex strength. Okay, strong polar vortex values. In other words, if the blue lines were way up high, we would be talking about the complete kind of entrapment of cold air over the Arctic. Weak polar vortexes are the ones that wobble, let their cold air out, link up with the tropospheric flow, and give us a better signal for really cold air outbreaks somewhere across the northern hemisphere. Now, what's interesting is, all right, look, the average is seen right here. That line, that thick one right there. And what we're seeing is that the polar vortex is not expected to maintain like full-on normal or even above normal strength. So it's not fully established yet. And this is the polar vortex we're talking about. But the years when we have problems, big problems with colder weather, the polar vortex tends to send a big ridge like this one, shoving into Alaska, into this area. It displaces the polar vortex, which is here, okay? It just kind of shoves it like that, and it tends to wobble its way around and then comes back and hits North America, delivering the big Arctic blast. But we're not there yet. We're not talking about a connected polar vortex yet. I'm just saying what could happen later. So I was looking at one other thing, all right? We've analyzed ocean temperatures in the Pacific. The Atlantic is very warm. We've now looked at the Chukchi Sea. We know what's going on with La Niña, but I mentioned we have to talk about this. Earlier in the week, I said we have to talk about what's going on in the Indian Ocean. Now, you see the cold water here versus the warm there? The Indian Ocean has something very similar to like El Nino, La Nina, but it's called something different. It's called the Indian Ocean Dipole. And if you have a look, since the beginning of September, there's been very strong trade winds here that have made the turn around like that. Now, that's not uncommon, but the strength of the return coming across as part of the northern side of the equator in the Indian Ocean has been stronger. So here's your La Nina, that's that. But I'm talking about these winds right here, and do they have an influence? Well, we call that change the IOD, Indian Ocean Dipole. And when you're getting those westerly wind bursts, like I just showed you coming across the Indian Ocean, the IOD plummets. And it's very low right now. And we have a historical record of this, not just going back to 2021, but well beyond that. And so I want to show you some things here. During the November timeframes where the Indian Ocean Dipole went negative, like it is now, it was cold here and mild here. Maybe cold a little off the east and southeast, but does that not look like what I just showed you in the forecast? It seems to be that these analog years to very negative Indian Ocean Dipole were mild. Then look what happened in December. We almost flipped it. We brought in more mild conditions, Chukchi Sea, Bering Sea, Alaska. We began to build up a storehouse of cold air throughout Canada that then was unleashed into the east. So what I'm trying to tell you is we're all trying to wonder we think most of November is mild for most of North America. There'll be cold shots. Don't get me wrong. There's seasonal transition. But could this be a signal worth noting that says, hey, we might need to get ready for December to be a legit December, like cold air? There's another component to this as well. You see, when you look overall at the precipitation pattern, there's something that really jumps out at me. Now, it's not this. Okay, I can explain this away in a second. If you're having westerly wind bursts here, easterly wind bursts there, this is where your rising motion is. That's a lot of MJO phase 4, 5, right? But what's concerning about this is that, hey, we see a drier signal here, a drier signal in the southeast. Where is it wetter? Northwest, northern tier of the United States, Great Lakes, Canada. But take a look at South America. Yet another indicator, and yes, many of these years were La Nina years, but another indicator that southern Brazil and Argentina could be dealing with drought, while the Cerrado, much of the rest of Brazil, could be wetter. Now, you know that right now, over the next 2 weeks, models have honed in on this region being wetter than average. And this is going to be huge for Brazil's success in this growing season. But I'm thinking a lot about the risk here. Santa Fe, maybe toward Cordoba. Buenos Aires is looking drier. All of the wettest conditions are back tucked up into the western side of Argentina. And you know that most of our long-range models have some sort of solution that keeps this region dry. Now, the models still do not agree on how wet it's expected to be here, with the European being the more wet model, which is the one that I'm showing you. But I think there's an interesting story developing in North American temperature pattern and South American precipitation pattern as we walk through these next 60 days. And we're going to keep building on this narrative and add pieces to it. But with that, I'm going to wrap up today, now that you kind of know where we're heading, and just say thank you, and we'll pick this up on Monday. Have a good one.